twist. That's how it should look. Now we're looking at it from the side. You'll notice there's 1, 2, 3 creases along the edge there that are kind of equal space apart from each other. We don't want that crease, but this crease right here, the third crease down. We're going to take each one of these flaps and kind of fold it up along that third crease, like such. So here we have that third crease folded up, and we're going to make this crease on all 4 sides, kind of like we did before when we made the cylinder, unfolding it and letting it splay. So we're not going to be able to fully lock it right at the get-go, but we do want to get all these creases in such that the paper underneath this third crease, this white bit, has a crease going through the right way. And we're going to repeat this kind of fold on all 4 sides. Here I'm kind of showing what the end goal is going to be. Here you can see we have the crease we just made, and I did another crease over top it along its third crease as well on this flap. And you can see each flap is going to kind of cover the other one up a little, partially. And the goal here is to get a spiraled interlock. So you're trying to get each flap kind of covering the flap next to it. So right now, this flap is underneath this flap. This flap would go underneath that flap there. This flap would go underneath this flap, and this flap underneath the flap we started with. To get this achieved, however, you can't just work around one at a time folding these flaps. If you did that, by the time you got to the third flap, this flap would be so far splayed and kind of jarred out like this, it would not be able to be locked in to the last flap. As you can see here, it's already the third flap is already splayed quite a bit, with the third flap really badly splayed. So what we're going to need to do is unfold it partially like this, and just work our way around, getting all the creases the right way. And then we're going to kind of start working it slowly until we have something like this. This is the start of the interlock, I would say about a third of the way through. Right now, it's not interlocked enough that it will stay on its own. If I were to stop cupping my hand right now, this would immediately spring out and not stay. It's a little easier if you use tissue foil here. It will stay better, but this can be made, as you can see here, with just regular kami. It's more prone to tearing, but perfectly doable. Just takes a little bit of practice. So here we have the start of the interlock. As you can see, this corner here will need to get tucked into this flap. Same thing with this corner under this flap, this corner under that flap, so on and so forth. The only tricky thing about this is if I just started tucking this corner fully under this flap, I would lose all my progress over here. So again, the trick here is not focusing too much on one corner at a time, but just slowly working all the corners in, kind of at once. So again, a better closer up image. Here, I've gotten it locked enough that it's staying on its own. This is kind of tricky to get to this step, but once you're here, it gets a lot easier. Here's what the top view it looks like at this step point. You'll notice that the interlock is very uneven. It's kind of sloppy at its current stage. If I were to start trying to shape the rows from here, it wouldn't really stay together. You also notice the folding tool. This is important. You don't necessarily need to use a folding tool for this step. You could use a popsicle stick or any sort of like flat, rounded object will work well. Could be the bottom of a letter opener, just something preferably not too sharp. Like the handle of a letter opener, depending. Just whatever you can find that has sort of like a nice flat, rounded shape. What we're going to do here is we're going to kind of start working our way around, tucking all this paper up underneath here So the paper here up underneath, and get it all really locked nice and tightly. What's going to happen a lot though as you do this is as you start sliding the paper in like this, you'll notice the paper up underneath here kind of crumples in that pocket. And to keep it well interlocked, you kind of want to straighten that paper out so that it's tucked very nice and flat and kind of wrapped around in the pocket, not just crumpled in. So to do that, it helps take your folding tool and run it along the pockets where it's trying to crumple, and just kind of run the folding tool kind of in a circle around as you work it in. And that'll help immensely with getting it to stay locked. Here I finally got it all nicely interlocked to my satisfaction. This is actually a really good interlock here. You'll notice everything here is relatively even. Everything is nice and tight. Here you see there isn't a lot of you will have a little bit of a gap here. That's normal. Like a little bit of a triangle kind of poking through. You can fold those triangles down, back up underneath the model if you want, if you prefer that look. It's up to you. But I'm just showing what it looks like here. It's kind of the underneath. You can see it's very tightly packed in. Again, here you see it's nicely tightly packed in. So now we need to start shaping the outer petals. However, we have the start of one of the petals here. If you look closely, see if the next image shows it better, yeah. You see the start of the petal there, and if you go back here, you'll notice we can't really form a full petal without undoing the interlock partially. Because if we were to unfold this petal completely, the petal over here would start to be pushed out, and we don't want that. So what we want to do is start folding kind of just this corner of the petal closest to us down a bit. And what that does is it frees up the petal behind it more. So we just want to pull this out a little to free up the petal behind it. Then we're going to start folding the petal behind it down more, like such. So now you see we've done the petal behind there. And then every kind of petal after, as you can see, it will be pretty easy to access. So we're going to work our way around until we get back around to that petal that was stuck that we couldn't fully undo. So here's the top view with the 3 petals around, kind of, formed a bit more. Now what we need to do is take this petal here that we couldn't fully undo. Now it's freed up, right? We've opened up these 3, so now this one can be fully shaped like such. So now we have our outer petals done. And the next step is to work on the inner petals. The inner petals are both kind of easier and harder. They're easier in that they're not tucked behind each other nearly as tightly. They're harder in that you have this crease. Kind of goes around like that. And those creases make it really easy when you're wrapping the paper for instead of it wrapping past the crease like this, it'll just tear along that crease. It adds a stress point right here that you really want to watch out for. There's another stress point kind of up here where that same crease meets up right here. So just watch out for that. So the first step here to form the outer petals is I like to do a little pinch here. Kind of moving some of this paper kind of right here down and flattening it out a little like that. And you can see here that helps the outer petal to start to spread this way. And what we want to do is continue the wrap around here on this outer petal. So we get something that looks kind of like this. And it should meet kind of nice and neat with the outer petal here. So the inner petal kind of gets wrapped around such that it meets the outer petal. And then you're just going to repeat that on all 4 sides. The nice thing here is when you're doing this kind of wrap, because like I said, they're not interlocked, you can start with this pedal and then do that inner pedal and then do the adjacents, or you could just do one at a time. It doesn't really matter. They're not really locked against each other. So once you've done that, you've completed the bicolor rose. The last thing here is any shaping you may want to do, you can do. But this here is the bicolor rose. As you can see, it looks almost like two sheets of paper. It looks like you have, one set of petals. That's one sheet of paper. You just pushed this like in the box. But that's not how it's made. It's actually one sheet of paper, as you know, creating this lovely bicolor effect. And can be made, as you can see, with just regular kami. Makes a very cool dual color rose. Enjoy!